Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Okay, so this episode, we're going to talk about a piece from Jezebel. Yeah, I know. So you already know this is a dumpster fire, but it's actually not as bad as it could be, I don't think. But before we get into that piece, let me explain to you guys the backstory and the piece that led to this piece in Jezebel. And that is a piece that was in the New Republic for a brief shining moment last week. It was written by Dale Peck, who is an out gay journalist/author. And it was a piece about Pete Buttigieg and his particular problems with Buttigieg. And buried within his little personal anecdotes and critiques of Buttigieg's policy, he decides to take this kind of like wide right turn and have this discussion about Buttigieg's personal life, more specifically his sex life. And there were sections in the piece talking about whether Buttigieg was a top or a bottom and speculating as to why he would be either one, and not exactly using the nicest of language. He does refer to him as Mary Pete, which for you youngins who may not know this, calling a gay man Mary was a homophobic slur back in the day. Obviously, I've not heard anybody use it in quite a while, which is why I was so surprised to see it in the piece. I was like, I can't remember the last time I saw somebody call a gay man a Mary. But here we are, 2019, where apparently we just resurrect all of the old shit and try to make it new again. But so he does that. He goes into this little discussion about whether or not Mayor Pete likes it in the ass or not. We'll just leave that right there. But he also goes on to say that he wouldn't be comfortable having Buttigieg in the White House because, as a gay man who has only had one boyfriend and he married his first boyfriend, Peck is worried that Buttigieg would go through his quote-unquote gay adolescence in the White House, and that he would be too distracted by kind of sowing his wild oats because he didn't have that kind of younger period of time in which to do all of that. And so he's worried that Buttigieg would just be consumed by trying to have sex with as many people as possible while being president, which, may I take the opportunity to point out, even if there was somehow a President Pete Buttigieg, he would hardly be the first president trying to bang everything on two legs. And I would say, if I had to take a wild guess, I would say there's probably been more presidents who have had an affair while they're in the White House than presidents who haven't had an affair in the White House. So, first of all, that's a really stupid thing to say. Second of all, it does trade on that very old stereotype that all gay men are promiscuous and cannot perform monogamy, can't be faithful to one person. So there was just a lot of very questionable shit in this particular piece. So New Republic publishes it, and Twitter gets a hold of it, obviously, and screenshots start circulating around. And for what it's worth, the title of the Jezebel piece is Define Homophobic. I did not see anybody, and I'm not omniscient, obviously, but I didn't see anybody on my timeline or anybody that I follow have a problem with the New Republic piece calling it homophobic. There was a lot of what the fuck, because a lot of it's pretty harsh. I'll try to find a link to send it to you guys or put it in the show notes, because New Republic did end up taking it down after a couple of days. And my personal pet theory, which I have zero evidence to back up, but this is kind of like the only thing that really makes sense to me at this point, is that whoever published it for the New Republic, whoever was the editor on that, didn't really read the piece as thoroughly as they should have, maybe, and just kind of chucked it up there, and then all of a sudden people started reacting to it, and it was like, oh shit, we gotta take this down. So they took the piece down, and there has been controversy about that, but in Jezebel, Rich Jerswick has written a piece about the piece, because this is what we do now. We just write things about the things, and we just live in a self-perpetuating industry now. So But I thought this piece was interesting, and a lot of people gave Jezebel backlash for writing this piece, and there are parts of it that I do think require pushback, and I think Peck's piece, the original piece, does require a little bit of pushback because, like I said, you're trafficking in certain stereotypes and certain ideas about gay men that are no longer acceptable in society to say, because we've moved past certain ideas about gay men in society, and for the better, because it's not a lot of those old stereotypes, especially about them being promiscuous and stuff like that, was used to justify a lot of really nasty, ugly behavior back in the day, and it was kind of used as sort of a fig leaf justification for people being like, well, gay people deserve AIDS, they deserve HIV because they're just having sex with everybody, and what do you expect? So, again, a lot of pushback against stuff like that. So, I want to go ahead and get into Jezebel's piece, so let's go ahead and start. Imagine my surprise when late last week, I, an out gay man, found myself enrolled in an online course on homophobia that was attempting to teach me something I didn't know. I thought I'd seen it all. The withering glances, the systemic discrimination, the suffering in places that were worse off than us even at our worst, the well-meaning people saying with loving pity that it's not my fault and that they accept me, the restaurant servers desperate to believe that a man I'm eating across from in New York City and look nothing like is my brother. Now let me go ahead and stop for a second here. I couldn't find online what Jezebel's age is, but I'm assuming, looking at pictures, he's probably roughly about the same age as both me and Pete Buttigieg, which is late 30s. So, not to say that New York City is this wonderful, absolute, just fantastic utopian place where everybody's accepted, but I would imagine going out to eat in New York City as a gay person, being our age, you're probably not going to get a shit ton of looks. I mean, maybe you probably do. I don't know. It's probably not this blanket situation that it would be for gay people in other parts of the country. So it's kind of a little bit of weird privilege here that you're trying to invoke. Anyway, moving on. But there I was, virtually surrounded by people and news outlets who seemed extremely convinced that an act of gross homophobia had taken place, when it never would have occurred to me to categorize it as such. Now, after the fact, I remain unconvinced that author and critic Dale Peck's critique of presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg's My Mayor Pete problem, originally published and then unpublished by the New Republic, was homophobic in any definition of the word that I have ever experienced, despite having experienced the exact sort of gay-on-gay bitchery and contempt for the way I live my life as a gay man that Peck displays in his essay. NBC, The Hollywood Reporter, our sister site Gizmodo, on top of legions of tweeters all deemed it homophobic without much support, as if it was so self-evidently bigoted that they didn't need to waste their time explaining. Or maybe it was that they believed the definition of homophobic to be being mean to a gay person. Now, like I said, the piece, I think, went a little beyond being mean to a gay person. Like, I've pretty much already explained the sort of stereotypes that the piece traded in those particular spots. And I think you see this happen a lot, where people say that if somebody is X, then they can't be Y. Like, if somebody's black, they can't be racist. And I think the argument being made here is just because somebody's gay, they can't be homophobic. I don't know if, I mean, it's, and this is another thing where this kind of ties back into the argument that everybody was having the other day about Trump's tweets and the whole go back to your country and whether or not that was racist or not. And a lot of people wanted to defend that on the basis of, well, this isn't the textbook definition of racism. But everybody knows that telling somebody to go back to their home country or go back where you came from is a racist statement. So I think those who called this homophobic weren't necessarily going by the textbook definition of homophobia, but what we culturally accept to be as homophobia. Like, if you're calling a gay man a Mary, if you're insinuating that he's going to all of a sudden start cheating on his husband and just start having sex with everybody, if you're going to make those sorts of assertions, then that is what a lot of people would consider homophobic. Is it the textbook definition of homophobia? No. But is it what we would accept to be homophobic statements? Yes. So it's kind of, both of those situations to me are walking a really weird thin line that's, I don't know, it's kind of trying to parse things in a way. And a lot of this has to do with the environment that we're in now, with people trying to redefine what certain words mean and to try to make arguments that word X actually means thing Y when we've always assumed that it means thing X. But it's weird. It's a very weird place we're in linguistically, and I think a lot of people are trying to, all of a sudden now, we want to go by the dictionary definition of words to try to describe things, when for the past, 10 years, we've been ignoring the dictionary definition of words to try to make words mean things that they don't mean. So, anyway, done with that. Moving back to the piece. These arguments largely overlook the history baked into Peck's contemporary critique. Though he used language and techniques that were too outrageous for their own good, Peck spoke to a topic that has preoccupied gay people for decades: how we present ourselves in public, and how that relates to our status within the larger straight-dominated world. Is it cheating to iron out queerness for the sake of straights, or is it merely savvy? To fail to examine Buttigieg through the lens of authenticity is to willfully fail to examine Buttigieg as a candidate. Now, when I did my episode on Slate's piece in the same vein that they ran back in March, I do believe I talked about this topic, but I'm not thoroughly understanding the lack of understanding that Buttigieg may very well just be living his life the way that he has chosen to live it, and it's not some kind of performance art to make the straights more comfortable with him, or any such thing, but that this is the life he wants. Like, he wants to have a husband and a house and a family and to live that kind of life. And it's odd that there are people that can't accept that gay people might want to live that life. And for what it's worth, there is a section of gay culture that is very critical of gay men and gay people, LGBTQ people like Buttigieg, who have chosen to live a quote-unquote cis-heteronormative life. Or basically, and I'll say it because a lot of this ties back to people who believe in Marxist thought and class theory and stuff like that. People who have chosen to live a bourgeois life. It's considered a form of selling out. Like, if you're not living your life in a certain way, if you're not radicalizing yourself, if you're just living like a normal, comfortable, middle class, upper middle class life, like a straight person would, that you're like a discredit to your sexuality. You're a sellout, basically. Like, if you're not out there in the streets, if you're not radically pushing for specific agendas, if you're not demonstrating your sexuality in a certain way, it's viewed that you're like trying to normalize yourself, trying to like mainstream yourself in a way that is not authentic. And I mean, if you look at it through the strain of somebody being a Marxist and looking at it through class theory, then that can kind of make sense. But I still come back to the very anti-Marxist individualist notion that people can choose to live their lives however they want. And it's a testament to how far we've come as a society that a gay person can live that kind of like middle life where you don't have to be in the closet anymore, but you don't have to be like out in the streets protesting either. Like, you can just live like a normal life and you can just be that kind of normal everyday person. Like, there's space for that now. And I don't view that as a bad thing, because not everybody wants to be the person who's out there leading the charge for LGBTQ rights or anything like that. Like, some people just want to just live their lives. Like, not everybody wants to be an activist. And now we have a place where gay people can be that. And it's not like an either or choice for them anymore. So, anyway, moving back to the piece. Peck played out in-group fighting in public, and a lot of seemingly straight people with no real background in gay history or culture rushed to the defense of the victimized gay Buttigieg, who would probably rather be struck dead than be shaken from his chronic mildness and exhibit a fifth of Peck's linguistic vigor about anything. The response was not just patronizing in the way that straight people feel the need that they need to infantilize gay people in order to relate to them. It was just a sign of total ignorance about the culture that was supposedly being defended. Peck, while assumptive and reductive, was using certain observable trends within gay culture to get under Buttigieg's skin, or the skin of his supporters. His vast knowledge of the culture resulting from spending 52 years as a gay man is what allowed for him to do this. I didn't read the essay as an act of homophobia, but one of expert gayness. First off, I don't feel like it's infantilizing to gay people to point out that certain things are just not really acceptable to say in public anymore, or at least it makes certain people very uncomfortable to hear somebody say that. And like I said, yes, there is a subsection of gay culture where this kind of call out is acceptable and necessary, I guess, to an extent, or at least some people feel like it's necessary. But it's done in a way that it's hard to explain. But even Jezebel can admit here that what Peck said was assumptive and reductive, which goes to, I think, a lot of the people's problem with the original Peck piece was that the assumptions, like the reductiveness and the assumptiveness of it, of assuming that this gay man, should he become president, is all of a sudden just like going to want to fuck everybody, or that you want to sit here and speculate about his sexuality, or you want to speculate about what he does and does not do in the bedroom. Like, it's crass in a way that I think maybe Peck, because of his age, and I think there is a slight defense of Peck here, that sometimes it's kind of like when your older, like, uncle or your grandpa or someone like that is still out here saying nigger, or still out here saying coon, or like overtly racist language like that. And it's kind of like you can't quite figure out, like, okay, that's not really okay to say in public anymore. Like, we don't do that anymore. Like, stop it. But a thing that I do kind of want to come to Peck's defense on, and that is the age gap. Like Jezebel pointed out, Peck is 52, and just to go ahead and say it, because Jezebel points it out later on in the piece, Peck is also legally married. But the age gap between Peck and Buttigieg is not that large if you look at it strictly from a chronological perspective. I mean, you're talking, I think Buttigieg is either 38 or 39, so you're talking like maybe somewhere between 10 to 12 years. But the difference in your life as a gay man, that 10 years is massive. Like, there's a huge difference. And I feel like a lot of times when older gay men tend to criticize younger gay men for wanting to live these specific quote-unquote straight lifestyles, there is a bit of get off my lawn-ness, because this is something that, for Peck, when he was Buttigieg's age, wasn't really an option for him. And it is an option now, obviously, for guys like Buttigieg, and older ones, younger ones. It's an option for everybody, but there does seem to be, like, that generational difference, and I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it, outside of just saying, get off my lawn, because it does kind of have that vibe, where there's, like, you kids nowadays don't understand how good you have it. When I was your age, I had to do X, Y, and Z just to be able to survive as a gay man. And now, gay men and gay people in general don't have to live their lives that way anymore. So that generational gap, I think, does kind of account for a bit of the bitchiness of older gay people towards younger gay people. And it is something that you see pop up every so often, not normally in like mainstream publications like the New Republic. Like, I think that's another thing that kind of made this blow up, is like this wasn't in like a gay magazine or any kind of like LGBTQ community sort of thing, but this was like a major publication where people may not understand the backstory and the history of these sorts of critiques, like these sorts of like gay on gay critiques. And so some people might have taken it like, whoa, holy shit, which most people did, but there are people who did read that, and I've seen it from a couple different people who read it and were like, y'all overreacting, this is just normal shit in our community. But anyway, moving back to the piece. The piece eviscerated Buttigieg's politics. Embedded in the oblivion are both the liberal delusion that people are naturally good and the neoliberal sophistry that the market, like the tide, will raise everybody up with it. But also, and ultimately distractingly, his presentation as a gay man. It didn't denigrate Buttigieg for being gay. That would be homophobic, but for what he does with his gay. Mary Pete and I are just not the same kind of gay, wrote Peck. He speculated on Buttigieg's sexual positioning preference. I get a definite top by default vibe from him, which is to say I bet he thinks about getting fucked but he's too uptight to do it. And theorizing that because Buttigieg came out just 4 years ago, at the age of 33, he still has his gay adolescence to pass through. I'm not saying that I don't want him to shave his chest or do Molly or try the Lucky Pierre, and that doing so in the White House could prove distracting. I want a man whose mind is on his job, not what could have been, or what he thinks he can still get away with, wrote Peck. He predicted that Buttigieg's path is leading him to a gay parody of heteronormative bourgeois domesticity. Okay, now, in here there is something that does annoy me deeply, and that is slamming Buttigieg for how and when he came out. Now, like you said, he did come out when he was 33 years old, and it was after he became mayor of South Bend. And like I said, when I discussed it, when I was discussing the Slate piece from back in March, he wrote a op-ed for, I forget which local paper it was, basically coming out. And in the op-ed, he had made it pretty clear that he was coming out because he was interested in moving to the part of his life where he's ready to settle down. Like, he's ready to find a life partner, to get married. At the time he wrote the essay, gay marriage wasn't legal yet. It was still, I think, 6 months after he wrote the piece, but he had expressed that, like, I want to, if this becomes legal, I want to get married. I want to maybe have a family. So this idea of slamming Buttigieg because that he came out later in life and because he married the first guy that he dated is kind of shitty to me. And I'm not entirely okay, actually I'm not at all okay, with people wanting to drag LGBTQ people for when they come out. It's a personal decision, and for what it's worth, for a section of Buttigieg's life, he was in the military, and it was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So there was a section of his life where even if he wanted to come out, he couldn't. That would have cost him his military career. Now, obviously, he could have did it before then. Maybe, if for whatever reason, he didn't. Maybe he didn't feel comfortable. Maybe he wasn't ready to be public about it. He didn't do it while he was running for mayor, and obviously, that would be a very difficult decision to make, to come out while you are running for elected office, because, I mean, you like to think that people are going to be, like, cool and normal about shit, but you know how campaigns work nowadays. It could have gotten really ugly really quick for him, and that's not the way you want to come out. So he did it when he did it for whatever reasons. I mean, okay, it took him until he was 33. I mean, what? It's his choice, it's his life, it's his decision, and I'm not cool with people wanting to drag people for not coming out when they were like 14. Like, okay, there's plenty of reasons why one does that. There's plenty of reasons why one doesn't do that. It's not for me or anybody else to know or to have explained to us why people come out when they come out. It's a personal decision, and it's not one that anybody should get shit for. Anyway, moving on. It's rude writing that knows it's rude, a sort of performative, exaggerated takedown that is designed to make you feel guilty for laughing at it. It's an example of what the gays called reading. Just because it isn't coming out of lined lips and broadcast on television via RuPaul's Drag Race doesn't make it any less of a reading. It's part of the culture. Now, you don't have to like this part of the culture. I'm wary of it myself, and I try to avoid doing it. When I've critiqued another gay man publicly, I've tried to avoid certain elements of cruelty, like mocking his appearance, and I felt like I was backed by a good cause, but I guess that's what they all say. Self-righteousness is a cornerstone of the medium. No, Rich, that's actually, like, a good way to do that. Like, if you want to attack somebody, like, don't bring the personal into it. Like, that's just nasty and gross and disgusting, and it dilutes your message. Like, what Peck's problems with Buttigieg's policies are what they are, and that's fine. Like, I disagree with Peck. Obviously, as a libertarian, I don't even know what neoliberal is supposed to mean anymore, aside from it's just like the boogeyman word that everybody uses to call somebody they don't like. Like, as far as words that have been devoid of meaning, I think neoliberal actually ranks above Nazi for me at this point. But when you have policy problems with somebody, okay, state your policy problems. When you start bringing personal shit into it, not only did you just dilute your message policy-wise, but now that's all that anybody's going to focus on. So now any legitimate critiques you might have had of somebody, now they've just been washed away because you decided to make it nasty and personal. And this isn't just a critique of Peck's writing. This is a critique of everybody that does this. And it's something that everybody should be cautious of and nobody should engage in, because, like I said, it dilutes your message. It makes people focus on the wrong things versus the substantial, perhaps correct analyses or problems that you might have with somebody's policy. Like, just don't do that, people. Just don't do that. Let's keep it professional. Let's not take it personal, people. That's gross. Moving on. You can call this treatment of one gay man at the hands of another, less visible, less powerful, less possessing of millions of dollars of fundraising, gay man nasty. You can call it endemic of the problem with gay culture. You could say you actually have many problems with gay culture and would rather avoid it, and at least that would be honest. You can say it's bad writing. You can call it out for its blinded whiteness. Regarding his emphatic moniker for Buttigieg, Peck writes, "For those of you wondering about Mary Pete, a couple of months ago I asked Facebook what the gay equivalent of Uncle Tom was, and this was the answer the answer at which we collectively arrived, as if gays and black people are mutually exclusive. But I do not think you can, with any intellectual heft, call this illustration of a fundamental way in which some gay men have historically related and continue to relate homophobic." Okay, fair enough. You are welcome to your opinion, Jesuit. I think I've already explained how exactly people are using the term homophobic here, if they are using the term homophobic. So I don't think we really need to go into that again, so moving on. Peck slipped his ACT UP roots into the piece, and that was no coincidence. He wanted to make clear that this was an example of a radical facing down an assimilationist. Buttigieg's status as the latter was also interrogated carefully by Slate's Christina Catarucci in a May piece originally titled, "Is Pete Buttigieg just another white male candidate, or does his gayness count as diversity?" Side note, full disclosure, I did an episode on that. Slate didn't yank the piece entirely like the New Republic did, so cowardly to Peck, but it did rename it to, "In a diverse candidate field, how is Pete Buttigieg's sexuality factoring into his appeal?" after it experienced considerable backlash. Much of the feedback seemed irritated that Catarucci dare question Buttigieg's privilege, and not just give him a gold star for being the best little boy in the world. People have already written and written and written about how wonderful it is to have a gay man as a serious presidential candidate. And I agree, it's a great thing on its face. Other people are interested in probing what it actually means for this particular gay man to be a serious presidential candidate. On the milquetoast assimilation life Peck envisions for Buttigieg, he wrote, "The historic home, the tasteful decor, no more than one nude photograph of a muscular torso per room, statuary only if they're fair copies of Greek and Roman originals, the 2 or 4 or 6-pack, depending on how often you can get to the gym and how much you hate yourself, the theater, always spelled with an R-E, subscription, the opera subscription, the ballet subscription, the book club, the AKC certified toy dog with at least one charming neuroses and or dietary tick, the winter vacation to someplace tropical, the summer vacation to someplace cultural, the specialty kitchen appliances, you just have to have a sous vide machine. It changed our life. Sorry boys, that's not a life. That's something you buy from a catalog. Now, in all fairness to Peck, I find people like this to be incredibly annoying too. But if that's how somebody chooses to live their life, that is their business. I think people that have ridiculous little dogs that have ridiculous little ticks are stupid too. I think people who pick their vacation spots based on how it's going to look on Instagram are stupid. I think sous vide needs to die in a fire. Like, stop it. Just stop being bougie and buy a fucking crock pot already, people. You're not reinventing the wheel here. Stop it. But if that's how somebody chooses to live, fine. And it's not that they're being performative, or maybe they are, but it's what they want. So there you go. And I don't really see why it's something that needs to be called out. It is what it is. Like, okay, and I guess there is something of a stereotype that's developing around gay men, especially married gay men, that kind of buys into this particular trope right here, especially seeing how gay couples are oftentimes portrayed in popular culture now as being that couple. And that's something to unpack too, but it's just, I don't really understand slamming people for living a life that, I mean, it's not the one you chose for yourself. That's certainly not the life I would choose for myself either, but whatever. Anyway, moving on. Peck wasn't only performing his culture by reading Buttigieg, he was upholding an age-old divide that dates back to the origins of gay culture. Back to when the radical ways of the Gay Liberation Front, which formed immediately after Stonewall, contrasted with those of the integration-oriented Mattachine Society. In a 2008 self-described manifesto called The Future of Queer, that ran in Harper's, author and professor Fenton Johnson described the shift in power over the next few decades that resulted from AIDS taking out a lot of the radicals. Said power ended up winding up in the hands of assimilationists, whose lead Buttigieg seems to be following, which ultimately opened the door for marriage equality. This next part is taken from The Future of Queer. The LGBT assimilationist rise to power is easy to trace. The brave, righteously angry civil rights activists of the 1970s became the brave, righteously angry AIDS activists of the 1980s and early 1990s. But we died or lost ourselves to grief, and by the time the white coats figured out the cocktail, by the time the drugs healed instead of killed, the people they saved were shells of themselves, and all the survivors had the energy to do was lie on the warm sands of Fort Lauderdale or by the pool in Palm Springs and contemplate the mystery of survival. The cocktail that turned HIV from a death sentence into a manageable illness was perfected in 1996. The assimilationists moved the battle for state-sanctioned marriage to center stage in national politics during that year's presidential election. The assimilationists have won, with state-sanctioned marriage as the very mortar cementing the bricks of the wall of convention that separates us from ourselves, from one another, from all that is unfamiliar, strange, challenging, and thus from learning and growth. The assimilationists have won, with the neocons building their wonder-bread philosophies upon the ashes of queers who laid their lives on the line in the fight for AIDS visibility and treatment. The assimilationists have won, those men and women whose highest aspiration was to be like everybody else, whose greatest act of imagination was picturing matching Barca loungers in front of a flat-screen television and matching custom-designed wedding rings. To kind of explain that particular block, obviously, most everybody feels that gay marriage is a good thing, by and large, that you can get legally married as a gay couple, as a same-sex couple. But there is a strain in queer thought that by selling out in that way of having a state-sanctioned marriage is selling out. And I don't disagree. Like, I think state-sanctioned marriage is a bullshit too. That being said, I'm in one. So's Peck. So's a lot of other same-sex couples because of what it affords you as a couple. And I get the critique of state-sanctioned marriages. But again, this is one of those where it was carving out a place to where if you want to do something, you can do it. It's a positive right, not a negative right. And for those who want to be legally married in a same-sex couple, now you have the ability and the right to do that. If you don't want to do it, cool. Don't fucking do it. I will support you all damn day. But again, it's this idea that if somebody chooses a lifestyle that you don't agree with and more closely aligns to cis-heteronormative norms than you would particularly like for that person to be aligning themselves to, that they've somehow done something wrong. And you've chosen to live your life in a different way. And like I said before, not everybody wants to be this super activist type person. Some people just do want to sit in the Barca loungers in front of the flat screen TVs and have matching custom wedding rings and have the house and the kids and the SUV and then maybe the weekend car and just normal shit. Like, and that's it. Like, it's fine. And it's cool that we're in a space that same-sex couples can have that. But it's just, there is that strain of thought, and it probably is weird to those who don't realize that exists. And when you sit down and think about it, especially if you are more of the minarchist/anarchist brand, then you can understand why certain gay people would have an issue with gay marriage being legal and viewing it as something of a sellout. But again, it's just, you let people do what they want to do with their lives and just stop. Anyway, moving on. And here's why that pisses off the radicals, again per Johnson. Only when we exchanged our lofty ideals for conventionality was our struggle embraced. Only when we sought to exchange, in the words of the assimilationist attorney William Exridge, sexual promiscuity for the potentially civilizing effect of state-sanctioned marriage were we accepted. As if a community risking their lives to care for their own in the face of church and government condemnation was not the very highest manifestation of civilized behavior. As if marriage civilized, to offer one of the countless examples, Harvey Weinstein. Again, this, I think, speaks to that generational/age divide that I was talking about earlier, where if you were in that struggle in the 80s and 90s and you did have to be that very out activist kind of person to like struggle to normalize and mainstream same-sex couples and to mainstream LGBT lifestyles, communities, stuff like that, if you did have to live through the AIDS epidemic, I can kind of have a little bit of sympathy for you when you look at somebody like Buttigieg, or like I said, any younger same-sex couple, or any younger LGBTQ person, and be like, what are you bitching about? Like, what are you angry about? Like, we fought AIDS. You fight what exactly? Oh, we were dying by the millions, and you guys have what? You have to decide which suburb you want to live in? So I can kind of get that a little bit. But again, it's something that I think a lot of the older LGBTQ community kind of needs to come to grips with, is that we don't live in that world anymore. We live in this world, and it's at least part of what was fought for is for gay people to just be able to have normal lives. And that obviously some gay people, after getting that right, both legally and culturally, are going to exercise it, and they are going to live what is societally considered a normal life. And for what it's worth, like, I don't exactly live a normal life either. I don't live what would normally be considered like the cis-heteronormative female life. Like, I don't have kids. I have a husband. We don't have kids. We're not having kids. We don't really participate in the kind of culture that you would think that a married couple of our age would be participating in. We don't have an SUV. I don't cart kids anywhere. Like, we don't really have like friends that have small children like that. Like, it's just, we don't really live that life either, but that's okay. Like, it's okay to not want to live a normal life, just as well as it's okay if you are my age and you have 4 kids and you stay at home and you cart them to soccer practice and you socialize with other parents. Like, okay, whatever, cool, live whatever life makes you happiest. That's all anybody needs to understand about anybody. So, and that's why I get so frustrated with these Buttigieg pieces, because it's like, just back up, just back off, dude. Like, he's done nothing to you to deserve any of this. But moving back to the piece, because we need to finish this up. So you can see how a guy like Buttigieg, who took 33 years to come out because he fretted about how it might affect his career, who was able and content to pass as straight or something like it during those 33 years, who, when he did finally come out to the public via op-ed, did so gently, assuring readers that his friends and families view this as just part of who I am, and that being gay has had no bearing on my job performance in business, in the military, or in my current role as mayor, might piss off some more dyed-in-the-wool gays. It probably would have served well for Peck to explain this aspect of his ethos better, if my interpretation of it is correct and I'm not just projecting. But it seems apparent to me, given the context. I should note here that Peck is married, according to Wikipedia, and that I use Johnson's example not to position Peck and Buttigieg against each other on the issue of marriage, but to give a broader sense of the clashing ideologies that seem to be at hand and continue to be relevant amongst queer people. Peck called bullshit on Buttigieg crassly and not always elegantly, but in the pecking way that he was hired to do. His piece was going to receive a backlash, of course. You can't say anything interesting without risking hearing from a bunch of people on the internet who are mad that you didn't say what you said how they would have said it, which makes the New Republic's decision to remove the piece stupid and infuriating. With the structural integrity of a sandcastle built on the ocean's edge, the publication caved to the criticism it invited. If you want to accept gay people, and not just because it makes you feel better about yourself, you have to accept that they may do things that you find grotesque, but that make them no less acceptable and no less human. With Peck, TNR exposed the wider culture to a facet of gay culture, with particularly rough edges, and when people found it unsightly, they did their best to make it unseen. That the removal of writing that was not found to be plagiarized or factually inaccurate didn't cause a tenth of the controversy as Peck's opinion was telling in itself. We only like well-behaved gay men in these refined, outlined quarters, apparently. The rest can go to hell. Now, to that last point of the New Republic pulling the piece. To me, it depends on why they pulled it. Now, if my personal little pet theory is correct, and they didn't really realize what they published, and then once they read it, were like, oh shit, this doesn't fall in line with our values, and then they pulled it, like, okay, that's one thing. Although, how they handled this was really just fucking stupid altogether, because they put it out there, and then they tried to defend it as satire, and then they pulled it completely. But if they pulled it full well knowing when they published it what it was they were publishing, and then they pulled it after people were critical of it, yes, that is something to call bullshit on, because you should be, as a publication, standing behind the pieces and the authors that you publish. Like, that is the whole point of an editorial process, is that you look at the things and you say, yes, this is good, mash that publish button. And then you stand behind it because you went through the editorial process and you guys decided it was okay, and so you published it. Now, this current trend of people pulling all sorts of different works, from everything from pieces from magazines and online platforms all the way up to books, because people got pissed off about it online, yeah, that needs to stop. Like, that's bullshit. And that does... Jezebel is right to call out the New Republic on that. So, again, it's just one of those things where I think Jezebel really hit the nail on the head when he said that this revealed a portion of gay culture that the public at large is not super aware of, and once they were, it was kind of like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? And the New Republic should have known that before they published it. Again, the editorial process exists for a reason, people. And I know I rail about this all the time, but editors have jobs. But, I mean, it's just, the whole point of the process is to make sure that when you publish something, it's something that you're like, yep, this belongs on our platform. And if you don't like it, fuck off. But that's not the world we live in anymore, apparently. And it's just, that does suck. Like, I wish they would have left it up just because. Like, if you published it, then fuck it, stand behind it. But anyway, I wanted to go ahead and discuss the Peck piece, and obviously Jeswick's piece, because again, it echoes back to the episode I did in May on Slate's piece, and a lot of the criticisms I had of that are still valid, and obviously you can find that if you go through my back catalog, it's there. And yeah, I'm not comfortable with this environment where people, because of Buttigieg's sexuality, feel free to criticize him in a way that wouldn't be acceptable, like if one of the female candidates or one of the candidates of color were discussed in certain racist or sexist terms. Like, that wouldn't be considered okay. Discussing a gay candidate using terms and tropes that have been pretty much societally accepted as homophobic isn't okay either. So it's something that does need to be called out, because it is this bizarre double standard, I think. And that's why I keep coming back to it. And also just because I'm not... Why do we have to criticize this man at all? Like, he's chosen the way he wants to live his life, and fine, go for it. Okay, you want to be an openly gay man, you got married, you want certain things in life that are cis heteronormative, like, okay, there's nothing... I've never thought that there was anything special about being homosexual that precludes you from wanting certain things that heterosexual people want. Like, I've never thought that being homosexual means that, like, you wouldn't want a family, or that you wouldn't want a life partner, or that you wouldn't want to live a certain kind of lifestyle. So that's part of the critique that I don't understand about this man, because it's just... It's buying into some very retrograde ideas about homosexuality that I thought we were done with, but apparently not. So I guess we have to fight these wars again, like so many other wars that I thought were fought and won, but apparently we're back here, so we got to do this again. So hopefully this will be the last time we have to have this discussion, but I'm afraid it won't be. But anyway, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, if you did make it this far, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.